I gotta laminate her birthday.
Sell Steve.
That was
Kelly.
Kelly.
Yeah, I guess.
Randy.
She's not here to take.
They don't trust us with the laminators.
All right.
You need anything laminated, I hook you up. I got it, gotta go.
You gotta go.
So I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you'd all please rise and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Eric, would you call the roll?
Michael DeVito, here. James Shiloh. Christian Copeland.
Here.
Beth Marie Evans.
Here.
Alex Grados. Here. Eric Jones, present. Alan Zantu.
Present.
Steve. Here. And I guess Assistant Superintendent for HR.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Wonderful. Good evening. Thank you for attending this evening's town hall meeting. While regular meetings of the Board of Education are scheduled for us to conduct business, town hall meetings are intended to give us a chance to engage in dialogue with our community. We welcome your questions, suggestions, and comments, and we will respond as we're able. There may be matters that require more information, and in those cases, we delegate a response to the superintendent. We're committed to conducting ourselves with respect and transparency, and we would just ask that you do the same. Mr. Wilder will facilitate this portion of our meeting, and it's my pleasure to turn our meeting over to him now.
And again, welcome to everybody. Small crowd tonight, but like Mr. DeVito said, these meetings are intended for two-way dialogue. During regular board meetings, we don't have the opportunity to do that. So at this point, if anybody in the audience wants to make a comment or pose a question, we'd be glad to listen. Anybody interested in doing that?
Thank you. So if you wouldn't mind just standing forward, stating your name and address, and then if you could try to keep your remarks to 3 minutes, and we can do our best to try to facilitate every comment or question.
Okay. My name is Ron Milner, and I live at 2439 Dustin Drive in Sycamore. I've been a resident here for about 15 years or so. I live here with my wife and 2 daughters. Both of my daughters graduated from Sycamore High School. And the last time I was here was maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. And I was talking about the importance of financial literacy. I know that when I was in school, I was never taught anything about financial literacy. But then I went to the School of Hard Knocks, and you would learn the lesson once you go there. And I learned my lesson. So now I come back to schools, businesses, and I talk about the importance of this subject matter. I've been doing financial literacy courses since 2011. I've been subjected to the subject since 1998 actually. So I've been doing it for 26 years. It's a fascinating subject, and once you get the hang of it, and once you know what's happening in it, it'll change your life. My youngest daughter, who graduated from Sycamore High School, she works at Menards now. She just got a job there, and she sent me a text and she said, "Dad, can you look over my 401k plan and help me figure this out?" I looked at her 401k plan, and I thought to myself, if I was her age and I saw this thing, I wouldn't know what to do. It's so convoluted, it's unbelievable. But I'm gonna work with her on this. But again, we offer a financial literacy workshop called Money 101. It's a 6-lesson workshop, and it's designed to teach every young person how to manage and grow their funds. It's a lot of fun, it's very entertaining, and we did it at CPS schools. We did it at Fenwick High School in Oak Park, and we did it at the Oak Park Public Library. So we're out there in the community, and we're helping everyone because this subject is so important. It's fundamental to the growth of our students. So that's why I'm here. Thank you very much, Superintendent.
Yeah. I do remember when you were here last, and I think you sent or left some information that I did share with the high school administration, so they've got your materials.
I did, and I did receive your letter that you sent to me.
Okay, good. Good. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Anybody?
On the subject of finances, I guess I have a question. Is there a sort of one-page or executive level summary of the district's long-term facilities maintenance and capital expenditures plan? For instance, that you could point to and say, well, if the penny sales tax passes, then the stuff that's earmarked for facilities will be spent, in this way over the next 15 or 20 years.
There is not. There's a lengthy facility audit that's got all that information in it. It's not easily digestible to the public. So we're working to try to get that out. Actually, Lauren, who's with us, has developed a template for that. So we're working through filling out that template because I think you've got a good question. It would be helpful for the residents to know if that passes, how's that money gonna be used. I would argue even if it doesn't pass, that's important to have available on our website. One page is not feasible. Even the length of the current document, even though it's too long, probably need to end up devoting at least 2 or 3 pages to each building, just because there's that much information and some additional branding and photographs. So I don't know that it'll be 1 page, but it'll be, our goal is to make it digestible for the public so anybody can pick that up and get a grasp for what work needs to be done, how much our architects estimate that it's gonna cost, at least for the next couple of years. Any other questions or comments?
Oh, was I supposed to state my name? Sorry.
What's your name, Cole?
Cole Regner. I live at 415 Adams Street.
Thanks, Cole.
This is part of the town hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My name is Marvin Barnes, 1549 Daniel Court, Sycamore. Born and raised in Sycamore, graduated from Sycamore High School. And many years ago, I sat in your seat, and I also sat in Michael's seat that he's sitting in right now. The reason why I just wanted to speak is I am in support of the open election. Historically, when I was president of the school board, I tried to get my fellow board members at that time to support that and try to get it at least to a referendum stage, and I was unable to. And the reason why I can understand at that time was that on my board I had 2 farmers and another person that lived out in the country, not on a farm, and obviously they weren't supported. My father, who was from Sycamore and very closely tied to a lot of the farmers, explained to me at that time that the farmers wanted to be represented and they didn't want to support an open election like that. They wanted, that's the reason why it was kind of divided out like that for many, many, many years. And Sycamore now has changed, okay? And those family farms have all basically, not all disappeared, but the majority of them have disappeared. They're more corporate farms, leased out for rentals. The farms are managed by rentals. And so there isn't that close tie to the farms and the rural people, in my opinion, that need to have that. And so I think I read recently that the majority of the population is in Sycamore Township and Cortland Township, which I'm in Cortland Township. And for that reason, I mean, I know you've struggled for probably the last 10 years, having to appoint board members. And I think tell me if I'm going over my 3 minutes, but
I think we're okay. I don't see a whole lot of people waiting.
okay. But I have a really quick story, and if I run over, you just stop me. Before I ran, this was back in the 80s. I served from 87 to 91. There was a person who lived in Mayfield Township, and they won in an election by write-in. If I recall, 12 votes. And there was a lot of other members at the time who were candidates who were running, and they lost. And I couldn't figure out, how did somebody for 12 votes, and that's what woke me up, okay? I realized how that happened. So then, again, going forward, then I tried to get that passed, it didn't work. And then I read recently that back in the 90s, I don't remember it, but the board tried to pass it and it didn't pass. It's time, and I have done my share of going around the community telling people we really need this, because it's only fair to have the right candidates sitting in your chairs rather than just a candidate who happens to win in a Mayfield Township or a South Grove Township, and maybe better candidates live in Sycamore or Cortland Township. So I'm a very strong supporter of what you're trying to do, and I just wanted to give you my history and my story, so thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board at this time? Are there any board members who'd like to make comments or anything to that effect before we move on to the next item on the agenda? All right, we will close our town hall. All right, the next item on the agenda, so we're now moving to an old business item, which is board discussion regarding reports. This is something that I just want to give a little bit of context on. I'm hoping that we can just solely talk to the departmental and building level reports. The why to this even being a discussion is after I received a great amount of communication from the board, just in terms of feedback on the new reporting method for building level and department reports from the last meeting, and I think a lot of that feedback was heard and really good feedback. So just kind of giving you some context, the idea in inception was we were going to try and consolidate reports, focus efforts, try to get a little more aligned with our strategic goals and ultimately prioritize what the board wanted to see. There's some element of guesswork in this, so what we had at the last board meeting I think was probably the farthest end of the spectrum, right? Just pure written report and just the absence of some departmental reporting that may have been in a different modality. So I got your feedback, and what I'd like now is to try to get a sort of consensus from the board on these expectations. So ultimately, just guiding this discussion, speaking only to departmental reports and to building level reports, modality, more or less what you want to see, how you want to see it, when you want to see it, and just kind of bringing to focus a piece on the actual reporting side. I have here, and then I'll stop talking. Sorry, I had a little chart. Steve, would you just lay out the departments that we would normally have in our tree? I don't want to put you on the spot here, but
Sure.
you've got that.
And if I forget any, let me know. So typically in the past, we've heard from instructional technology, we've heard from student services or special education, learning and teaching. We've heard from transportation from time to time. We've heard from communications as well.
I know some of the other ones that maybe not so often, and again, it's just a matter of when. Director of Food Services, you know, there's out of school care, which we had last year, Director of Communications and Community Engagement. I know from time to time we've had Director of Buildings and Grounds. So just, and early childhood, I think Steve mentioned earlier. So those are the departments, right? And then the building level is gonna be, of course, the elementary schools, middle school, high school, life school, early childhood. So yeah, so with that, help me bring to you guys a better report for October in collaboration with the admin. 100% written report for building levels. What do we think? This is like, you want to see South Prairie 100% written update every month? Do you want to see South Prairie come in and do a presentation like they've done once a year? Again, let's just speak to the elementary schools just to start, and or building level for that matter. Is there any opinion? Because individually, you guys all had some pretty great feedback. So I think right now, like, we can't do anything individually. So as a unit, we can converge that idea. So.
Well, I'd like to start. I mean, for the elementary schools specifically, definitely a lot goes on. So if we got comprehensive reports, that would be very nice, it'd be informational. But I don't want to undersell the importance, I think, that the actual presentations the principals give us at the meetings. When we used to do it that way, at least when I first came on, and I thought those presentations were very valuable to determine what's going on at the schools, what the highlights are. And I also thought it gave the principals kind of a way to kind of show off what they're doing and what the teachers are doing, what the students are doing. So I like the presentations. I like that model.
Thank you, Christian.
Well, the presentations are important to get questions answered or even asked, because I noticed when we didn't have the presentation, nobody asked any questions, and so then we're not hearing, the feedback, and, when one of the other board members asks a question, I know in my case, then I thought of a question based on what they asked and what the person doing the presentation said, so, with the I'm not sure it's so important with the building stuff, unless we're gonna make a serious decision. But on the education part of it, to know what's going on in the classrooms, the presentations probably are more important.
So you like the in-person, you like somebody, a rep from the building coming
Yeah,
in,
so
talking
that
about
we
it.
can ask them questions, and I
So you
like to
can ask
hear
questions.
the other board members' questions, cause it
Understood.
provokes thoughts, it's thought-provoking, and, we aren't really able to ask them a question if they're not doing it, directly. I mean, we can read the report and email a question, but it's really not the same. I noticed that last time, when we didn't have that presentation.
Got it. Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome.
Alex, any opinion on this?
Honestly, I don't have an opinion one way or another. I'm fine with written or verbal. The only comment I have regarding reporting would be, in my opinion, is that when we upload reports to board docs, I feel everything needs to go in at one day. Though we upload some on Tuesday and then some come in on Friday, for me isn't working, because if I try to look at it between Tuesday and Thursday, I don't necessarily know what's new and what's not. Kelly does try to separate it out, but it just seems like an unnecessary step to have two separate uploads.
I'm gonna put that on a shelf. I wanna touch on that. Does that sum up kind of your big thing? Cause I definitely wanna come back to that right now, today. But
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, that's it, regardless
the-
of the modality,
Okay.
whatever.
Building
is-
wise,
is-
like written, in person, you're indifferent?
Yeah.
Okay, just when they get uploaded, which I think we'll, just as a board, just like have a secondary convening, so that's good. Thank you, Alex, for bringing that up. That about does it, right?
That's about all.
Perfect, okay. Ellen, what you got?
Yeah, I like the idea of, I'm new, right? So I haven't participated in all these, but the idea of having someone speak to it and see it on the screen and kind of walk through it, I like that idea. I'm curious, is there a general format or list of expectations? Are they trying to all report on the same sorts of information, or is it each principal and school's prerogative as to what they share and how they share it?
So formatting, before we kind of get into that, I think, I want to
Okay,
come back
perfect.
to that. Can I put
Yeah.
that on the table too?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
The only other thing I would comment on, I think at one time, maybe we still do, I think at one point there were meetings at the school that was presenting, maybe many years ago. I'm not sure if that's a burdensome or not, but might be kind of fun to do so if that made sense. If it was a burden, then maybe not, but then you kind of get to be at the school, they can show off their school, and we can kind of experience it all together.
That became a bigger issue post-COVID when we started trying to get all the meetings recorded, because it was creating a bigger hassle trying to drag that equipment around.
Okay.
There was an email Steve sent out too. It was in quite a bit, because there's actually, the location piece is coming up too, because the board should weigh in on that. And so, Steve, do you mind just addressing that super quick?
Yeah, I think it was in the weekly update, but at some point, when, now that we've closed on the building on Bethany Road, there is a room large enough, not this big, but large enough for board meetings. So, there's a consistent place that's got multiple entrances and exits. That's one of the, kind of safety concerns that boards, I think, legitimately have had. I think it would be really suitable for your regular board meeting. If there's a hot topic, so to speak, we might need to move it to a larger location. There's a sense of consistency there. I think we've talked about using some technology to put cameras, so we're not moving equipment all the time. You can station something permanent. Kelly, bless her heart, does a lot of packing up, bringing it out, setting it up, packing up and taking it back. So long-term, there's, I think, an opportunity to meet at that building, in terms of a location. Now, you don't get to visit schools. That's something that could be arranged, during the day if you're available and you wanna visit a school. All you gotta do is let me know. I'll let the principal know, and we'll work out the details. But there is a pretty nice location that we could use for board meetings, pretty consistently moving forward. So, that's a suggestion that I've got. Ultimately, the board needs to make that decision though.
And so, to that, just kind of piggybacking off of your comment, Alan, normally the board would set its agenda for its meeting locations and things in June, but in light of our recent policy committee, a lot of the, I think, tumultuation we've had over the summer, this new admin building, I think it would be a worthwhile conversation for the board to just at a minimum revisit that calendar and those locations as a standalone agenda item, or we just as a board collectively agree this is where, for either the remainder of the time, do it. So I think for a future agenda item, definitely, is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
fine.
So I wanna put it just as a future agenda.
And then the schools have a calendar, they know when these presentations are due or these reports are due?
The building level reports for,
Building level, yeah.
to be presented to the board,
Right, yes.
that I go to Steve,
Typically, we let them know, we try to get the agenda out a week in advance. We're working to try to get those reports the Friday before. Sometimes they come in the Monday or Tuesday, or I think to Alex's point, sometimes they get uploaded late just because unforeseen things happen at school. So the intent is for them all to be uploaded on a Tuesday. That does not happen all the time, but it's not a lack of effort or our calendar. It's sometimes
Right.
things just pop up
Yeah,
during
I
the
guess
day.
I meant more the presentation, so they have enough
Oh, yeah,
adequate time to
there's a
prepare.
calendar. We had a
Yes,
calendar
okay.
for that, yeah,
Perfect.
and rotated it monthly, yeah.
Well, that would come out of the board meeting where you agree on dates, and approve meeting dates and meeting locations.
Mhm.
They designated what school they'd be at, so they knew if it was at Southeast was presenting.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
That was also the time when we were meeting twice a month. So the first meeting of the month was always at the school, the second meeting of the month was always at the middle school. If we went to that format, we would just rotate, that around the schools and, wouldn't need the middle school all the time.
okay, so we'll, I
You
think.
can table it, that's for now.
Yeah, okay, so I'll
We
make
can
it a
park
few,
there.
we'll have it as a future agenda item for the locations, cause I definitely think with this being in flux, we should, land on something again, or at least revisit it. Eric, did you have any?
Regarding building level, I certainly always appreciate seeing the buildings. I appreciate having the building leadership come in. I think there's probably a balance in there, and I guess I'd like to know whether they also like that opportunity of getting in front of us and sharing what if they want the opportunity for a spotlight, I wouldn't deny that to anybody. My general stance for this whole conversation is if somebody wants to come speak to the board, I'm more than happy to have the board accommodate that. But as far as us requesting building administrators, if that's not something that they feel is worthwhile, I don't see a need to try and force them to do it. As far as the frequency of those written reports, I liked the content that was in there last time. I don't know if they've got enough stuff to write on a monthly basis, or if it's a trimester basis, or what. But I thought the reports that we got at the last meeting were sufficient to give us an idea of what's going on in the buildings, and I'm fine with that, but I'm also more than happy to have them come once a year and have their chance to show off what's going on.
With what we know now, do you feel comfortable saying, have them come in, present? Cause it seems like that's the general consensus, but that's 3 of 5. I got Alex on indifferent, you're sort of, leave it up to them.
I stand behind my original statement that if they don't see a value in it, I don't wanna add additional workload to them, because I don't know that I get so much out of it to inconvenience them. I certainly enjoy it, happy to sit through it, but I won't feel like I am missing out on something crucial in the district if they say that's not a good use of their time.
Steve, do you have that information available on the opinion of if they like or don't like presenting that to the board?
I've not polled. Now we've got a leadership team meeting tomorrow morning, so I'll have a chance to discuss that with them and just kind of ask for some feedback. my gut is that there's an opportunity to stand in front of the board and the public to present. But it's also a little bit of work, getting the building ready and that sort of thing too. So I don't have that, but I could easily have a conversation with the leadership team tomorrow morning.
Well, it'll be two questions then. One, presenting to the board, two, opening their building to the,
Yeah.
Right.
because it doesn't have to be both.
Gotcha.
Are we as a board comfortable then landing on the consensus of that group?
Again.
Like if you found out that they said, no, we don't like having us in the building and it is a burden to come in, would that change the minds of you, Alan, Beth, and Christian?
Yes, I mean, I agree with Eric on that, because I know they already have enough they have to do. So I don't wanna inconvenience them, but maybe it could be like a yearly thing, I don't know.
So the choice is theirs on Beth and Eric.
Right.
How do you feel about that, Christian and Alan?
I mean, if it's a burden, I'm not trying to put more on them at this point, I get that. But I would probably I'd be more obligated to physically go to the schools if we're not gonna be getting those presentations with like a feedback, like where I can actually ask questions.
So if they come back with a no, we should at minimum build some sort of opportunity for us as board members to see the schools or something like that would make you feel more comfortable.
And we already have that through Steve, I think we already have a process in place, but I would definitely set up more of a calendar around that, like when I would like to go in and accomplish that.
But that would be something you just want, you don't have any expectations for me on that?
No,
right?
no,
Okay.
I really like going to the buildings, seeing them. I like seeing what's going on in the buildings. When we do go for the meeting times, I mean, they're empty, there's no teachers, there's limited teachers, there's the ones that come to the meeting, and then there's no students, so you don't really see what's going on, you're being told what's going on. So maybe just going during the day, which is difficult for everybody who works, but you can find time. I mean, I could certainly make time in my schedule to do that.
So could I, if that was easier for the teachers.
How do you feel about that, Alan?
So for clarity, it's not a matter of whether the report exists, it's just whether it's presented to us or not.
Right now, yeah, as it currently stands,
Yeah.
this is like part A of,
Right,
you know,
right.
C, yeah, right.
So, yeah, and if it's a burdensome, sure, I think it would be fine if it were presented as it had been. But I do think that if we did do it that way, it would be great to take a moment and maybe there's like a summary slide that we would show to kind of to Beth Marie's point here, that if for some reason the administration, the principal didn't want to present, then when we have the conversation, we can look at it, just in case there's general questions, we have something generally to reference. I think that might be helpful.
Okay. I think that's, so I'm aggregating what you're saying. Summary slide, if building level and department say burdensome, we'd rather do a written report. Alan, you think a good thing that ultimately I agree with too, would be a slide during the meeting that gives some information about it rather than it just being written in board docs.
Right, because that would generate the same questions I would feel between us. And we would have that open discussion.
Agreed, and then the community can see some of those, maybe the key points that the principal wanted to showcase. If we aren't gonna go through the whole presentation, at least it's open to everybody to be able to see and celebrate, hopefully, a lot of the great things that are happening at those schools.
Could that summary slide, do you see that being in lieu of the physical report or
No,
in
it would-
addition to?
In addition to, so I think we'd wanna see more, probably the
Okay.
lengthy portion that they would wanna provide with more details. But I wouldn't wanna just gloss over it and say, you have any questions, no questions, move on. I think we still wanna celebrate it,
Okay.
and really explore it with that summary slide.
Does that sound pretty good too?
Yes,
Okay.
I liked the reports last time we received. It was
Okay,
good.
Yeah.
you'd like that, and so that kind of was a good segue into the next piece, and the slide piece, which is the content. So we liked the content of the department and building level reports that we saw. We felt like that content was good. Is it missing something? Does it need more? I think, or do we want to leave it up to the department and buildings? And then, like, Alan, you had made the comment of like a slideshow. What do you see, and I guess maybe we start there.
Yeah,
What do you
slides
see
maybe not
out?
right, but just page, right, a first page.
So a
whether-
single page on a like, it would be up here, it'd be a one page.
Yeah, hopefully a picture of something great that they wanna showcase, or I'm
Right.
kinda reaching a little bit here, not entirely sure, but my guess is at the very least that the principals, and I could be over speaking if I am, I'd love to hear it from Steve and Nick here, that maybe they wanna showcase and show off, a great assembly they had, or some great artwork that the students did, whatever it may be. And I think it'd be great for us to see it, for others to see it that are present at the meeting, and then some key points, right? So kind of an executive summary, real quick, not trying to be burdensome, but just, here's the real main highlights.
Okay, and this is our contingency plan. Maybe they all come back, they're like,
Yeah.
we love coming in, and then this is all, okay, cool. So this, but then we don't have to have another meeting,
I
right? Then we're
really
all on the
liked
same
when they
page.
had the book awards and they showed the pictures of, that was so cool and so cute. You
Yeah.
remember that, when we had the awards and their little books and their pictures? I love that so much.
Awesome.
I hope we see that, something like that again.
Yeah, okay. Well, that helps me a ton. I think that is really clear guidance to us, because that gives us an A or B. So, otherwise, content for the building or the department reports felt like, I mean, I know I had a couple of conversations. I
got it.
I think we're, any other feedback on the content?
We didn't specify any of that. That was each school decided what they wanted to share there.
I asked each of the levels, so EC5 worked together, middle school had a report, high school had a report. Just give us kind of highlights, things that are going on in the building, you know, things to celebrate. If there was a challenge, you know, something that they're working on, they could put it in there, but my goal was just for the board to have the opportunity to get kind of a summary of, hey, this month, you know, since the board met last, here's some of the things that have happened at North or at the EC5 level or at the middle school or high school. So I gave them some guidance. It was a little loose, but they've done these kind of reports for a long time. It was in, you know, presentation format. I think they had a pretty good feel for what to include. If you would like to see something different, please let me know so I can add to it, but just kind of some loose guidance.
One thing I would like to see added, and I don't wanna overstep my bounds or the board's bounds, but I wanna see maybe a list or an idea of what the school needs and what their plans to meet those needs are going forward. Just to put those on our radar. I know there's communications with you, Steve, about what each school needs day to day, but it's nice to know what they need going forward. Any needs of teachers, needs for facilities, transportation, et cetera. I think those are important for us to at least have an eye on.
So to that point, I think that information would be helpful. Do you see that coming in that monthly report, or do you see that being, like, having some level of control over because I could see that potentially fitting under a departmental report, or, and this is where I know this is reports are such a broad topic, but I guess my question would be to that, Christian, could that information find its way on a different report, not these building level or departmental reports? Because I don't know monthly, you know, that's my concern. Is it monthly? Would that need
That'd be
change?
too much.
Most,
But,
can
sorry,
I add,
please-
most of those elements have typically shown up around the budget
That's kind of, I
presentations.
feel like that would be helpful.
That's when they make their request for what they need next year from a budgetary standpoint, so we usually get that in the February-ish timeframe, right now.
Yep.
But maybe throughout the year, just having that kind of sprinkled in, just to have those on the radar. Not necessarily like for us to immediately make every single one into an action item, but just to have an awareness of each school and where they're at.
Okay, and it's like, I'm trying to, do you have like an idea of, is it just financial, or would it be like, are you talking like FTE, or like what?
I'd be speaking more from like a financial perspective, since we're in charge of making sure, but since we review the budget, it's nice to know what are the schools looking at, and, you know, what are we looking at? Because we have to prioritize everything, so it's important to know that.
Yeah, well, and that's like, I think to your point, Christian, like, I totally agree that information is super useful. I'm trying to figure out if, like, from a content perspective, if we wanna put it in that monthly report, or if we wanna put it in that, like, when, let's say, for example, technology comes and reports to us once a year, let's say, which is kind of the next part to this. Would it be a good idea for them to, when they do that report, whenever it may fall in the year, put that ask in? Or should all of those converge at one singular ask? Like, Eric was saying, right before the budget, if it's financial, or right before we do the personnel in, the springtime. Like, is there a single annual point that would be better served, rather than, or maybe even what we decided in that spring period gets added to these reports on a, does that,
No, I understand where
am
you're
I
coming
missing?
from. We're trying to fit it in, and what I described is a variety of different things, because
Okay.
the needs are diverse, and they can
Yeah.
go, like a facility need can go in the facilities report. There's different types of reports that we have, but I don't think we need it on a monthly basis. And that, again, this would just be strictly informational to the board, not necessarily turning into an action item. That would be the understanding of putting it in there. Those are gonna be addressed when hiring happens, when budgeting is requested, that kind of thing, when we do the budget. But maybe once a year, just having an idea of what each school's needs are going forward is just good for us to have an eye on. That's all I'm saying.
And that to me makes a lot of sense, because I think if we have, because essentially what you're saying is knowing as a board what individual departments need or individual schools need at least once a year, and then having that to point to would be useful for when we do the budget, when we do the levy, things to that effect, right?
Yes.
Okay, and
it would create it would allow better feedback, I guess, between the board, the admin, just to create more collaborative line of questioning and answering, just to understand what's going on.
but you're not hard set on it being in next month's report from
No.
South Prairie.
Not necessarily.
Like, I'm just not putting South Prairie on, but like, okay, but it doesn't, that's, all right, that is helpful, because I agree, and that, like, I think is, to Alex's earlier comment about, like, the update timeline, which, and this is why this is such a generic reports, but I think the board, so come a future meeting, I'd like the board to take a deeper look at reports, and I think that, like, that comment, Christian, will be a really, really well-found one when we look at some of those other reports the board receives too. Are there any other comments on that?
Just
or
two
on the-
things. One, I wonder if there's an opportunity during the budgeting period when it first kicks off in that January, February timeframe to maybe have like a very quick sneak peek, maybe from Nicole, kind of in line with what Christian was saying of here's where the needs at. We still have to sift through what those are, just so we have a general understanding. It might help to consolidate that, because it's probably already happening, I imagine, at the budgeting. Just a thought.
I would, as a building principal, I'd give you a dozen or two needs every day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, that's part of what the administrators do, because there's that constant need, right? We provide a lot, but that's, you're putting out a lot of fires every day, right? And watching fires over here behind you, Alan, but, when it comes to budgeting, we hear that all year long. And then what we do is when we're figuring out budget, which is finite, how do we prioritize what those needs are? I think it would be easy, during, and we talk about this a little bit during the finance committee
Subcommittee, yeah.
in the spring. Here's kind of the highlights of the needs, and here's how we factor that into our decision-making, before it comes to the board. So that's part of our process, and that can certainly be part of, and has been part of the process of the finance subcommittee meeting that meets in, it's usually April, March, something like that. But that's only 2 board members. So there's conversation there, and then some of that gets shared back with the entire board, not in the same level of detail, but it gets shared back with the rest of the board. I think Christian's got a really good point. I think it would be good for the board to have a grasp of what the needs are.
It sounds like there's some appetite for the October meeting to include some deeper diving on reports from Christian, Alex, and Alan here. Does that sound, am I fair in understanding that there's like that? Because some of these things, like and I'm trying to channel this just to the elementary and to the department, but it sounds like some of these other pieces would be useful, because there are many reports the board receives. I intend, and I know, Alex and I have been working on this as a subcommittee, to bring to you as a board a more comprehensive review of our reports, Like we did with committees, have a sort of assessment of what we really wanna see and what we don't wanna see. My hope with this is to respond to the feedback that the board gave me just overwhelmingly about just specifically the buildings and departments. But I also believe that there is a strong appetite for the board to, in October, review the other reports, the immense amount of other reports it receives, that timeline, and kind of the progress Alex and I have been making on that. Is it okay if we continue that conversation at that next meeting as an agenda item? Would that be acceptable?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Just for me, speaking for me, I guess.
Okay, great. Oh, is it Alan?
Yeah, I'm fine with that, that's fine, yeah.
Okay.
The only thing I wanted to add about the building report, it might be fun to have, what's coming between now and the next meeting? Maybe there's the book fair, and maybe somebody wants to go and explore that school, or the fun fair, whatever it may be, something fun that's going on, just
Yes.
to let us know that, hey, come check out our school if you'd like, here's what's going on. It might be nice to have.
Like some update on the district events, maybe communicated
Just
in the update.
some fun things that the principals would like to share, and it's almost an open invitation, not that it's necessarily needed, but at least we know it's upcoming, and if we or others wanted to come, good.
In the report that they
In the
present.
report.
In the report, I get
The
it.
monthly report, just, hey, we've got, book fair night at Southeast School, and it's a big deal, you should come if you want. You don't have to say you should come, but at least it notifies the board members that there's an opportunity to go to Southeast, a lot of students, and just see how the atmosphere is.
Okay, that makes sense. So content-wise,
Content's great.
with that inclusion, and then to your point, Christian, we're gonna address that with the future reports. And then in terms of location, it's gonna be a future agenda item. And then in terms of the format, is it gonna be presented or not? We're gonna leave it up to the board. Other than that, we covered the what, we covered the when. I guess the last piece, and this is sort of light, frequency. While there are many, and I kind of listed off the departments, do we as a board feel it necessary to set a frequency for when that would happen, like when they would come in to present? Like, do we want to see, because again, I'll use an example, September last year, we had communication come in. Lauren gave a nice presentation. She didn't come in this September, not because there was nothing on her, but we didn't ask her to come in. Do we want to create in our recurring calendar some degree of predictability like we have done in the past for the schools, but for the departments? And to that point, like Director of Food Services, that's a department. It does fall under other branches, but do we want to see that report? Is that we're gonna put that in the mix? Like, what frequency do you want to see the department reports, and what frequency do you want to see the building level reports? Once a year for the building, okay? I'll start with an easy one.
I think that's fine.
When you say building report, would we still get because now we got a building report, it sounds like something would be in person, and we got a building update, which is monthly, would we still have the monthly update with, like what Alan was
Right, so
saying?
assuming, so this, and again, this kind of is confusing because we did the contingency. Assuming the board, or assuming the building level and the departments say they prefer to do the monthly written, well then, that answers this question, right?
Mhm.
It's gonna be monthly written. But assuming they come back and say, no, we wanna come in, would we prefer they come in monthly to present each of their buildings? Or would we prefer, you see, like, that seems, okay, ghastly, like, no, we wouldn't do that. It's like, so then once a year, what are we like,
Maybe I misinterpreted the discussion. It feels like everybody likes the monthly written reports. We're just talking about optionally whether they would like to have a chance at least once a year to come present in person.
Exactly.
That was my
Yes.
understanding as
Okay,
well.
once a year for elementary schools. How about for departments?
But
Is it gonna-
I'm even fine on the monthly thing if that's a trimester or whatever frequency they think is worth reporting. Like, I don't wanna get to the point where we're getting monthly and by February it's like one sentence, nothing new happened, so. I'm open to feedback from them on whether they've got anything worth.
If we stick to a monthly meeting calendar, 12 meetings a year, right? Take July and June out of there, it's summer, maybe August, but with those, let's say 9, if you take those 3 months out, those 9 months, you've got, EC5. If if the DLT, the leadership team is interested in presenting, I think it'd be easy to set up a schedule where annually you would hear from each of those groups. Elementary, one time out of the year, Little Spartans once out of the year, student services once out of the year, high school once out of the year. I think we could set up a calendar where of those 9 remaining months, if, leadership team is open to that, we could set up a calendar where every September, it's gonna be communications, let's say. So I would just offer, after that conversation tomorrow, if the leadership team is open to that, it'd be easy to put a calendar together, just kind of a draft one, I can share it with Michael. I'll just throw that out as an idea.
How would you see that include, is that including departments too?
Yeah, I would include departments, and you might have to do a little consolidation, so, student services might include both special education and Little Spartans. Little Spartans falls under student services.
Yeah.
To make something like that work, you might consolidate, which is what we've done in the past. When we met at Opportunity House, it was student services and Little Spartans. Oscar presented at least one time down there, so you might have to do a little consolidation, but we would do that in a way that just makes sense.
Okay.
So I think that's doable.
Does everybody feel all like that?
Yeah, I guess my comment regarding building level is a little different than how I feel about the departmental reports.
So to that, go on to the part, because thank you, because I did have them as 2 pieces, so and they get kind of.
Only cause I feel like the board doesn't play as big of a role in what goes on physically day to day at the building level. Whereas I do feel like we have a much bigger role when it comes to some of the internal departments. What are our goals around finance? What are our goals around communication? What are our goals around instructional technology? That's where I think that there's probably a bigger need, at least for me, to have those representatives on a regular schedule. And that for some of those departments, it may be once a year. For other departments, maybe 2 or 3 times. I know we've talked about having like Mike Rice come in and talk about after each of the testing periods about what we're seeing. Maybe 1 or 2 of those can be written, and one in-person presentation is enough to get the board at least familiar. But I think there's so much going on at those levels that the board needs an opportunity to interact with those people. We need to build that understanding and relationship with those people, and I think that those are content areas that are very important to the public, and giving the opportunity for those presentations to take place live in here in front of the news, in front of them, even if nobody's coming, is important from a transparency standpoint.
Yes, that's what I was saying initially, the educational aspects, I think the presentations are more important with that, than with the general building stuff. That probably doesn't change that much, or does it? Am I wrong?
The building stuff?
Yeah, the things that goes on with the buildings probably doesn't change as much.
It's kind of there's a little bit, it doesn't change as much, and there's a little bit of a rhythm to it, same sorts of things happen at the beginning of the year, right? Same sorts of things happen in the winter and close to the holidays and at the end of the year. I see Eric's point, departmental is district-wide, right?
Right.
So I think the board is a little bit more in tune, or maybe should be a little bit more in tune, with what's going on in transportation, what's going on in the business office, what's going on in student services. So, I can see that difference. What I'm kinda hearing, so I'm just gonna ask for some clarification, is maybe the conversation with the leadership team tomorrow is, hey, we're gonna keep with written building reports, but it's really departments. Is it really departments that we'd like to see, potentially in front of the board? Is that really the conversation tomorrow? And I'm just asking, just to make sure I'm clear.
To me, that would make sense. I guess what I'm failing to understand, couldn't, for example, Mike Rice say, look what happened at West, this is so cool,
Yeah.
and then if a principal wanted to come in, they could, but I don't see the need to have every principal from every school give us a presentation, especially if there's some consistency from elementary to elementary, sort of wrapping it all up at a departmental level. To me, makes sense just for an efficiency standpoint and being proven to people's time. You don't have to have each principal take a night off. You can just have one administrator that supervises them. That's the way I see it, now that we're getting more into it. But so to answer make the long story short, yes, that's right, I agree.
Yes.
But that's just me.
That's what I was trying to convey in the beginning. I think Eric did a good job of emphasizing it a little more clearly.
So we
I
all.
guess I would just say, it really depends on, from my perspective, if the principals like to come and present, I don't think we should take that away from them. If they don't want to do that, and I think what you laid out, that makes sense, which is what Eric was talking about. But if they like that, they want that opportunity, I think we should definitely afford them that.
And to Alex's point, if Mike Rice is coming in talking about school report cards or winter map, you know, from time to time, building administrators could come in and be part of that, you know, presentation. Here's what we saw at the high school, here's what we saw at the middle school. So I think there's a way to combine those, but that can all be part of the conversation with the leadership team tomorrow morning.
Sure, and what I was trying to convey, is I don't feel that it needs to be all principals or no principals. I feel all principals that want to come and present can, but if you don't wanna come and present, it doesn't matter. Your presentation would be valuable, not your presentation doesn't matter, but, it's okay if you don't come.
Mike did a pretty good job of presenting everything when he did his presentations, so.
So Steve, would you just, because for my sake, because I feel like we just did a 180. So I'm just, yeah, we kind of started with everyone's coming in to give them the choice, to now it's, no, they're not going to come in, which is right. I guess
Well,
it's
it's still the
360.
choice.
We're right back to where we started. So, but we all worked together to get there, which is nice. So, building level, we'll leave it up to them. If they want to come in, great. If they don't, do the written report. Steve's gonna talk with them. They're gonna figure it out. We're gonna accept whatever they bring back with us, whatever Steve brings back. Department level, right? Like, so we're good on the building. That's what you
Right.
thought?
Yeah.
That's what you thought? Okay.
Right.
Department level, do we want them in person? Do we want them once a year? Or do we want them written and every month? Or a mix of those two? Because I feel like that, to me, is still open-ended.
It depends on the department, I guess.
So not every department, is what you're saying.
Some departments maybe once a year. I think like technology, we can do once a year. Education though, that's one that I'd like to see
Right.
almost quarterly. You know, I'd like to be updated on that one.
Okay,
Right, yes,
gotcha. So more on the education.
yes.
Other departments, Eric, technology, how frequent?
I'd agree, it's hard to come up with a fixed one right now, I'm sorry, when you called this morning about putting this together, I did not have time in my day to take a look ahead of time to come up with a list. I think by next month, I could probably have a better one just based on the last 12 years, but, you know, Nicole's already at most of the meetings, so I don't know that we have to have anything separate set aside for that per se. Same with Nick. Director, you know, transportation, I don't know what they would talk about more than once a year, if we even need that. Communications, since that's been such a big goal over the last several years, actually almost every year, I feel like since I've been on the board, we've talked about communication, at least hearing once a year what some of the new things are, new ways of engaging, how people are using the stuff we're putting out. I think that'd be great to hear. It doesn't have to be super intense. Same with technology. I think, you know, they're not, I think they're planning that stuff out well enough in advance that if we just get an update for the year, that's probably sufficient. We don't need to be getting reactionary reports on a, you know, quarterly basis unless they feel that there is. I mean, I trust most of these individuals to tell us whether there's something that's important enough to find some time in the meeting for as well. And I think we'll figure out as we go here if there's stuff that we're missing that we need to add that back. But I can, like I said, I'll take a look at it and try and come up with a better report by the next meeting of what we've received in the past that I'd at least like to continue seeing.
Okay, so you're of the mindset that at the next meeting, you want to revisit the frequency for these reports. Do you feel comfortable right now having an opinion on the modality, like, or more or less, if they're in person, if they're not in person, or is that personal preference, choice, board as a whole, Eric, because you're talking about it?
Well, everything I was just talking about, I would like to have in person. I mean, I'm talking about the in-person events. I don't need a monthly report from transportation. I don't even need a monthly report from communications per se, but I would like to once a year at least get to hear from those individuals and get a chance to hear about what's going on in their relevant area this year and what support they need from us.
So So we have, I'm seeing a head shake, so consensus on, for sure, departments in person. Frequency, TBD, based on board calendar. Content, obviously, TBD, based on calendar. Is that all? Anybody else wanna weigh in on that?
Well,
You don't
then,
feel that?
one thing I would add, I feel that the written reports for buildings work well. I feel we could do something like that for departments, but it could be the same at buildings. If you have something to add it to the report. If you don't, that's okay, just say, no, I don't have much to add this month, but I have a feeling Mike Rice might have a lot more to add than, let's say, Lacey Lance, because they're two completely different animals, right? There would be more updates in education, perhaps even monthly updates. Whereas there wouldn't necessarily be that in transportation, was the two we talked about earlier.
So you're comfortable with the frequency, sort of, like Eric was saying, being dependent on additional information we receive?
Yeah.
At the next meeting where we address reports?
But I
at large?
wouldn't want, personally, I just don't see the need for in-person reports much more than annually for any department. And then if there's a supplementary report they wanna provide in a written format, that's fine, but they don't have to again.
Yeah, I think those department chair ones we got, like if we
Yeah.
had a building level report and an administrative level or department level report that was just add anything you feel relevant this month.
Exactly, yeah.
At least we've given the opportunity there for them to throw something in and.
Yeah.
Steve, you getting all that
I think
feedback?
I'm
pretty clear?
getting it all real good. We don't necessarily need to set a calendar for when it's really truly about, hey, there's been a development, right, or an advance, and so the really good example was with Phoebe in technology, the strategic technology plan, that was a new development. Something like that in the future would be good for her to come in and present that. And at the same time, maybe a quick update on things, how things are going in technology in general. Lauren in communications does a communications plan, so as that gets updated, there's an opportunity for her to come in and present. There are stretches during the year where we're just kind of nose to the grindstone, getting stuff done, and there's not necessarily development, so there may be months where we don't have that. But that's okay, is what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, I think like the finance curriculum, those have a more set schedule throughout the year that's
Yeah.
repetitive, so we should be able to develop an expectation that we're gonna get XYZ report, at least until we feel those aren't useful. But for other ones that don't necessarily have a fixed recurring calendar like that.
Sprinkled in is okay.
Yeah, sprinkled in is fine.
And what we're gonna talk about in October, at the end of October, is going to be a more comprehensive review of reports. So, finance, curriculum, where some of those have some degree of compulsiveness, but for the sake of like what Eric said and what Steve said, the consensus is the admin team, at their discretion, will sprinkle in the in-person departmental updates for the non-compulsive departmental updates that we'll discuss next month. Building level will be at the discretion of Steve and his team, but more than likely, written is acceptable if they don't feel compelled to come in. Does that sum it up? Does feel good?
I thought written would be okay for departments as well.
Yep, yeah,
To
I
their
don't think there's
discretion.
any, it would be I would expect that if you were gonna come in and present something, you'd have a slideshow. You wouldn't just talk, so like, that, in that slideshow would have
No,
words on it.
you could just submit a written report similar to the monthly building without coming in, or do we want, the only way we get information from departments is they come in?
That's the takeaway I've got, is that.
That's not what I meant,
No.
if that's, no.
Eric, you're shaking your head. I'm
I
glad.
feel like I just heard two opposite things.
I know, that's the problem.
That they can add anything to a written report every month that they want to, but that there will be a schedule to bring in at least certain members of that group, at least for an
Once a year.
in-person
Possibly
meeting.
once a
Which
year.
is different from what you said of
Well,
sprinkling.
so what I heard was, like, learning and teaching to me needs to come in a couple times. And in my mind, that's fall, winter, and spring. That's a big piece that's the most important thing that we do, right? Now, communications, there may be something to add that doesn't necessarily necessitate, a presentation in front of the board, but Lauren would always have the opportunity to put something in writing and share that with the board. Is
Yeah,
that what I'm hearing?
that's what I meant, is there still the opportunity to just, so, for example, Lauren could say, FYI, Parent Square was down for a week. You don't need to come and make a presentation about it, but you could just communicate it to the board in an update format.
Would you like to see that come to, I mean, because I would think that would go to Steve, and then Steve would include that in our weekly update, but is that acceptable?
Something like that, yeah. that would be-
Whichever, if you put it in an update, you put it in the meeting
I'm
packet,
kind
I'm
of fine either
indifferent,
way.
just
Okay.
But I think
an
we were
opportunity
really.
So-
for them to
so
share.
we-
is all.
So now that group, I would refer, I refer to as the cabinet, you know, the directors,
Right.
the 2 assistant superintendents, myself. We've got discretion that if, you know, there's something like a Parent Square was down, you might see that in the weekly update. Something a little bit more important, we're working on implementing Parent Square, you might get that in a departmental report explaining what it is. But the rollout of Parent Square, Lauren might come and do a presentation so that you guys can see what it looks like, and I'm just using that as
That's
an
an
example.
I feel like that's a great,
Excellent
Good.
example.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Okay.
yeah, that's.
But I think with Mike, he may give an update on an ELA revision, like in the monthly update, but that's
Right, yeah.
outside of those 3 times he comes in
Yeah.
to talk about
Yeah.
map data.
but they still have the choice.
Right,
So-
and one of those map updates may be a refresh of like the detail behind it, and the other two are more of a, okay, now that you understand the principles, let's just look quickly at the results this year, you know, this quarter is an update.
Yeah.
So it seems like we have 2 buckets, right? The ones that we wanna have come in at a regular cadence and present to us, and then those that when there's an event or a reason to come in, they should come in, I think, right? Do we wanna bucketize those and
I
try to?
think it's specifying the educational part of it, the departments that are, if we wanna refer to them as departments that are educational.
Mhm.
And then we are having other things that don't really change that much, because like Steve said, education is what we do, so I think that's one of the most important. You know, to have the meetings more frequently, especially if something changes, or with the reports from Mike Rice are very important. Just so we can see, cause for example, in one of his reports, in special ed, math was down, so we would wanna take a look at that if we saw that math, you know, that would be an important presentation.
Yep.
And an area important to have a discussion, but on some of the other things that don't really change that much, you know, we're probably good with the monthly report, at least that's how I understood it.
Yeah, I guess my question is, do we wanna just, and maybe this is the list that you were gonna come up with for next meeting, Eric, but check which ones are the ones that have a regular cadence and which ones are as needed and as wanted by the department. It sounds like we're kind of all in, I think, all in agreement of that, it's just a matter of which ones fall into which category.
Except I thought all of them would be in the as needed, as wanted
Oh,
category, and then from there, there'd be some that we'd have a regular.
But
Sorry,
it
maybe
sounds
I'm
like maybe
misunderstanding
this might be a
again.
more helpful tool for the next meeting, cause I know we're zooming in on the stuff that was most immediately pressing, which is the building level and departmental. It sounds like there is appetite though from the board to understand when and how and what for the reports at large. I think it would be valuable if the board had a calendar that outlined an exact list of what reports the board receives, when they typically receive them, what those contain. Is there appetite for such a document to exist?
Yes, especially for the public to use, I think that helps them understand like when we're gonna be, I mean, for anyone that cares to look at it, but yes, anybody that wants to look at it will be able to see what we're doing throughout the year, when we're gonna be having these discussions, and could be theoretically present at the meeting when we're doing that.
Excellent.
yep.
You would agree? I know how you feel, Alex.
Sure, well, anyone that wants to communicate with the board should have the opportunity to do that monthly. I guess that's how, I thought that was already practice, but if it's not, I feel it should be.
Yep.
Any
Okay.
department chair or principal, put it in the weekly update, put it in a memo, send it out to us.
Yeah.
We wanna hear it.
Yeah, great. I think we agree.
And Eric, the synthesizing document, valuable, not valuable? Of what we received?
Oh,
when we-
the calendar thing, yeah, well, I thought that we were already in the progress of putting that together, so
Yes.
yeah, I see this all just tying
To
together.
that
when-
conversation.
When we've got a better view exactly of what we've received in the past, or what we should be receiving, or whatnot, then we'll be able to, I think, iterate over that and say, you know what, this is probably gonna be most useful if we could have a back and forth dialogue while this is presented versus this is information only, we don't need to, a discussion might not be valuable, or we can call for one the following meeting if something comes up. I think we'll get to that point.
Perfect.
It is hard to just wrap your head around the whole thing.
There's a lot,
In
because
one
it's
sitting and
yeah,
go,
right.
oh, well, we definitely need that in February, and I think we'll.
But we've
we'll
got,
just
at
have to
least
get there.
now, the takeaway is we've got the building level, I think, hammered out in terms of the what, when, and how. We have the departmental hammered out to some degree with frequency sort of up in the air, but we know how they're gonna present, at least with some degree of autonomy, and we know what they're going to present is going to be tied to what needs to be presented. So that, to me, gives me the direction I need, and then I can come back to the board next meeting with a more broad review of reports at large, when those reports should happen, what those reports should contain, with a overarching singular document that I think gives you a timeline, is what I'm hearing from the board. To the earlier tabled piece, which was the update timeline that you brought up, Alex, about when that, like, and that I think is just more or less about like the diligent board packet. I guess it's sort of connected to reports because it's about it, but I think that would be a better served piece for that October meeting when we're talking about reports as a whole, because then we can also talk about like the pragmatic approach of when these things get released. Do you feel like that'd be an okay time to talk about when they get updated, whether it be batches, whether it be at one time, or do you?
Sure.
Is that
Well,
okay?
Yeah, I guess I just added that when we switched to this once a month meeting format, it was my understanding back then that that one of the advantages to that was that all the content would be available for like a week prior to the meeting.
Okay.
So if that's not the case, then I guess we just need to know
Steve,
that,
are you
or
prepared to talk
understand
about
what
this?
the holdup is so that we can change our expectations so that that can.
I think the expectation should stay. I would just want the board to know that there are times that you've got it on your calendar, you've got time set aside, and then bam, something happens that just prevents you from doing that. Our effort is always to have it on Tuesday, or as soon as possible if there's a delay. And as long as the board is understanding of that, I think we're okay. It's helpful to have it by Tuesday so that you guys have the chance to look at everything in advance, ask questions, be prepared when you come to the meeting. And I, when we made this change, really pushed the leadership team to have everything in a week in advance. So I'll continue to do that. I think that's their desire. But sometimes you have a school threat that derails everything, right? So just know that there will be some times that it gets delayed, but we'll get it in as soon as we can.
I guess my thinking, and it's just me, if there is a delay, I would prefer the whole release is delayed, or at least we don't get notification of the entire board packet, because I feel that if the whole packet was released at once, even if that was on Friday, I would have been able to catch that EIS issue.
Well, I think.
But because it was separate, and I would have had to go back and correctly
I think
look.
what you're saying too, and like you making a really good point, Alex, I think we should talk about that at the October meeting.
Sure.
So is that okay? Can we wait to
Yeah.
talk about this at the October meeting? Okay, awesome. Any other comments about building level of department? Or we feel pretty good? And there's definitely appetite for more discussion, which is always great. Awesome. One more comment I'll add, which is just before we adjourn, is this book, as we're going into tax levy season, I think really, really a great read. If you don't have time to read the whole book, like many of us don't, the last 3 chapters, starting with chapter 25, I would say just really, really dive into it. If you haven't already read Coming to Order, which was the other book, this one right here, if you do nothing else, and you're like, Michael, I don't care about reading this or any of this, this book is just, I think, I was just so excited about it, and I think it's always great to share a good book. So these 2 books, last 3 chapters, if you're looking for the abbreviated version, great. Well, we've gotten through everything on the list, and I've explained this weird book that showed up on your desk, so this meeting stands adjourned.